Today's lecture will be on the lymphatic system. So the first part of the lymphatic system that we should look at is their functions. Their job is to return interstitial fluid back to the bloodstream. So when we're looking at arteries, capillaries, and veins, we see that interstitial fluid will be released from the arterial to the venous system, and then will enter into the lymphatic system, which will then be called lymph. Their job is to transport lipids and lipid-soluble vitamins into the bloodstream. Particularly, we see this such as the lacteals in the digestive system. Also, in the thymus, we see the structure right here. In the thymus, their job is for production and maturation of lymphocytes. Its job is to generate an immune response against antigens in the interstitial fluid. We usually see this happen in the lymph nodes. And then again, as mentioned, once interstitial fluid from capillaries enters the lymphatic capillaries, it's called lymph, and its job is to transport the interstitial fluid and the solutes. So when we're looking at the important structures, some of the main structures that we see are going to be first the lymphatic vessels, which in a deeper sense we look at the lymphatic capillaries, which change into vessels, which will then change into lymph nodes, which then run into some sort of a duct. This example is the thoracic duct. And then eventually it's going to enter into the venous system back into circulation, which helps maintain blood pressure. Some other important structures that we see, or ancillary structures, are the thymus, the spleen, the Peyer's patches, or the mucosa-associated lymphatic tissues. The Peyer's patches, these are the lacteals, which will allow for absorption of lipids into the system. The tonsils, which is a protective mechanism in the digestive system. So the first part we're going to talk about are the lymphatic capillaries. These are closed-end tubules. So when we're looking at the capillaries, you can see how they're interwoven throughout. You can see here through the arterial system, and they're interwoven through the venous system. There are closed-end tubules that are interdispersed among all the blood capillaries, capillary beds. They have overlapping endothelial cells that act as one-way valves. So this is a blown-up version of it. So we can see the openings here. These are the one-way valves, part of the endothelial lining of the capillaries. We see in the capillary system this region here. So in the venous and arterial capillary beds, we see interstitial fluid. Once the interstitial fluid enters into the lymphatic capillaries, we then give it the term lymph. So now the lymph will be running from the lymphatic capillaries into lymphatic vessels, then into lymph nodes, and eventually back into circulation. So this is another blown up version of a lymphatic capillaries. Again, we see the overlapping endothelial cells here. We see these overlapping endothelial cells form the valves, which prevent backflow of the lymph. The lymph is going to flow in general circulation or be able to return back into general circulation through the skeletal muscle pump. So very similar to the venous system when we're looking at that. So every time you contract a muscle, the lymph will flow in a one-directional format and will not be able to be permitted to exit out. These resemble venules. So when we're looking at the venules, they're composed of 3 vascular tunics, and they also have the valves similar to the veins. So when we're looking at the general flow, what we would see now is we're going to go from lymphatic capillaries to lymphatic vessels, then into lymphatic nodes, and then back into the trunks. So as the blood is, or as the lymph, excuse me, is flowing into the nodes, we would have it going from the afferent lymphatic vesicles, meaning traveling towards. It would be going through a node, and then it would exit out an efferent lymphatic vesicle, and eventually it's going to all drain into these different regions, or what we consider to be trunks. So the first one we're going to talk about are the jugular trunks. So these right jugular trunks, they are going to collect the drainage from the head and the neck. We have the subclavian trunk here. Their job is to collect the lymph drainage from the upper limbs, breast, and superficial thoracic walls. We have the bronchomediastinal trunk, which is going to drain mostly the deep thoracic structures. We also have the lumbar trunks here, which are going to be bringing the lymph from the lower limbs, the abdominal pelvic wall, and the pelvic organs. We also have different ducts, as you can see here. So these trunks are going to be the main intervention or way in which the lymph is going to be flowing through, and then eventually it's going to drop into some sort of a duct. So we can see here the bronchomediastinal, the subclavian, and jugular are eventually going to drop into the right lymphatic duct, and the lumbar trunks, the intestinal trunks, these are all going to drop into the thoracic duct. So this is another picture of the ducts. So they're going to be, or they're formed, these different, the right lymphatic duct and the thoracic duct are going to be the fusion of all the lymphatic trunks. So the first one we're going to talk about is going to be the right lymphatic duct. The right lymphatic duct, I'll just go back here. Here, the right lymphatic duct, located right here, is deep to the clavicle. It's going to return lymph at the junction of the right subclavian and internal jugular veins. So you can see on this side we have the left internal jugular vein. Here we have the left subclavian vein here, and then right in between, if this was on the right side, this would be where it's located. So here we have the left internal jugular vein, the right subclavian vein, and then we have the right lymphatic duct. So again, when we look at the picture here, it's going to be basically draining this entire region. So this entire region, it's returning lymph from the right subclavian and internal jugular veins. It's going to be draining the right side of the head, the upper limbs, and the right side of the thorax. The next area would be the thoracic duct. It's the largest lymphatic vessel, so I'll just back up again. So when we're looking at the thoracic duct, you can see it here. It's extremely large. It runs the full area of the torso, basically to the division of the diaphragm. So this thoracic duct is going to be, it begins inferior to the diaphragm. It's It's formed next to the cisternae chyli here, which is just a large bifurcation of the different types of trunks. It passes through the aortic opening. It is going to return the lymph drainage between the left subclavian here. Just erase this. So we'll have a drainage coming up the thoracic duct, and then it's going to return the drainage between the left subclavian and the left internal jugular vein. Its job, or what we look at whenever we're seeing the drainages, since it is the largest, you can see that it's going to drain the majority of the left side of the head, left upper arm, the majority of the torso, and the lower appendages. So that was just a short lecture on the structures of the lymphatic system.